So I'm Sonia Gupta. I'm Managing Director at Accenture, and I'm Managing Director for Growth and Innovation. I'm based out of Singapore, and I have the extraordinary privilege of working with leaders across industries, focused really on their reinvention and looking for growth opportunities and using innovation really as the way to get there. Accenture embarked on a study where we interviewed and spoke to 8,800 consumers globally across 23 markets. And there are some really interesting findings around what's common and what's distinct across those markets. And maybe I call out a few of those big themes that we're seeing. And, when we start with the consumer, then we can start to see the implications across the different industries and how it's playing out. So I think the one big theme that we're seeing is really health has become pivotal. And we're seeing a lot of consumers actually spending a lot more time, energy, effort in actually being quite thoughtful about what they consume, how they consume. You can see both men and women making an effort around nutrition, exercise. You're seeing a rise of solutions around quantification, of health, right? So quantified me, your calorie consumption, your nutritional intake. There's also a whole lot of other industries that are looking at hybrid models of physical and digital models around the gym, right? How do you get training and coaching, continue your martial arts, continue, all of the other things that you do, but you try and do it in a sort of a hybrid model. So I think this thing of health continuing to be at the center, we see that as a lasting behavior on the back of the pandemic. I think the second thing I would call out is hygiene. So I think, and this has direct implications to the categories linked to hygiene, but also hygiene in other ways, right? Hygiene of public spaces, malls, hygiene around what's in the product, right? The cleaning powers of a product that you use and so on. So I think hygiene is another piece, but also the visual optics of hygiene. And, I shared a story about a company called Uluma in China. It's kind of the equivalent of Food Panda, Deliveroo, or Uber Eats in other markets. And what they've started to do is they've started to create a reassurance certificate, right? Which actually tells you who has handled your product, who's picked and packed your product, who's cooked it. They put sensors to actually register the temperatures of the people working on it. I think the third, which I think this is the one that whenever I share with everybody, they're like, hey, I can totally relate to that one, is the rise of digital commerce, right? So we've seen 160% increase in expected in e-commerce purchases from both new or low frequency users. And I think that's really important because in all of the different markets, depending on the maturity of both demand and supply, you would see offtake a bit different in the past. And we've been talking about e-commerce now for 15 years in different forms. But really there are all kinds of statistics, but really, we've seen more in 8 weeks than we've seen in 8 years, right? So I think the interesting thing is the cross-category implications. So it's not just food, it's food, it's health, it's education, it's apparel, it's sportswear, it's, so you see the whole continuum, including health services, so telehealth, right? Which was not an area which you would originally feel comfortable. You wanted to physically visit a doctor. So we're seeing all of these new services that are going online very rapidly, and industry to move to digital payments, which has helped enormously, right, in terms of the uptake of e-commerce. So some very real, trends around e-commerce, and it's here to stay. And I think the interesting observation there is also how we're shopping, right? When you think about e-commerce, people are making fewer purchases, but larger baskets, right? So the number of instances, and you kind of do it in one big shop. And if you forget something in a physical store as well, when you do go to a physical store, you're very targeted. You're not lingering, walking around the aisles. You just have a list and you're out the door, and you're minimizing your time in store. If you do forget something, you're not replacing it, right? You're not doing what you did in the past where you'd still make the effort, right? So you're either in the basket or you're not. And this has very strong implications for manufacturers and, just consumer companies around how do you stay top of mind? How do you generate impulse, right? So things that you would buy as you left the store at the till. And how do you simulate that in a world that's, for a huge part digital and will be hybrid as markets open up? But how do you continue to create a consumer experience that's compelling and allowing your brands to actually be top of mind, right? When you do that. Maybe there are two other trends, if you think this is helpful, right? I think 67% of people actually continue to look at the home as the hub, right? And in terms of their preference of, if you think of a continuum of being at home, going to a friend's home, all the way through to being in a bar, a concert, or a sports environment, right? A big live sporting event. There is huge comfort in the home being the center of entertainment, social engagement, hobbies, so the home, staying in is the new going out, right? Home is the hub. And it presents a lot of new opportunities for a range of, organizations, from consumer goods to services and so on, service providers and so on. And also the rise of the prosumer or the hobbyist, right? So you're working with your hands, you're creating things, you're doing more DIY. People have become bakers, all these very talented people who, had day jobs are suddenly discovering all their passions and spending a lot of time getting better at craftsmanship, and a huge rise also in online education. So people who are trying to upskill themselves while they're at home. So I think the home as the hub is also a really important theme. I think travel and hospitality has obviously been hit very, very adversely. And the interesting thing that we're seeing is, for example, if I recall the numbers correctly, in Singapore residents and basically people who live here spend about $3.9 billion on overseas tourism, right, a year. And I think the opportunity as markets are starting to open up, that the travel and hospitality industry is seeing, is how do you actually get the tourism dollar in market? The very last couple that I would highlight, I think there is a very concerted effort by consumers and social organizations, but also the private sector and the public sector, the recognition of conscious consumption and being very aware about the sustainability, of what you're producing, but also what you're consuming. Yeah, so I think people have become aware of how you can make do with a lot less, right? A lot of us are looking at our wardrobes and going, really, what am I doing with so much? Because I use so little, right? So I think it's leading to a lot of conscious consumption. There is also a rise of protecting the neighborhood store, your local homegrown entrepreneurs, which I think is a wonderful movement in itself, right? So it's a society coming together to actually preserve all that's good about what's local. Global brands that had digitized and had created online platforms to find, reach, serve, and engage these consumers have done very well, because they have the trust, they have the distribution footprint, right? And people are able to continue to engage with them. The ones that have lost out are the ones that have not had the flexibility or created the access, right? And didn't have the trust. So if you are in a routine, well-established category with a brand that's trusted and you are digital, you benefit. I think my mom used to tell me this phrase, which loosely translates to, you can choose what you do, but you can't choose what you like to do. And it was her way of actually making sure that as we went through life's choices, we were acutely aware of what made us unique, what came easily to us. And actually, with every experience and every choice that you make, you actually become self-aware about what gives you energy, what makes you happy, under what conditions do you thrive. I had this perfect wisdom when I started out. It wasn't. I fell into many things. But I have found that, and I'm trying increasingly, I have 2 teenagers, and I'm trying increasingly to get them to become self-aware about, I think the best gift, frankly, you can give your children is the gift of self-awareness and judgment. The hardest things to do. But if you can, I think, you can be many things. You can be talented, you can be driven, But if you are self-aware and you have good judgment, I think those two things take you quite far. Pay close attention as you go through life and the choices that you make around who you are and under what conditions you thrive. I like to be a little scared every day, so it seems very brave and foolish, some of the choices I've made in the past, a bit clueless and confident, if you will. But when I look back at every experience and choice I have made, it has made me more self-aware about what comes easily to me. What are some things I could never be excellent at, no matter how hard I tried, because I'm just not wired like that. But the good thing is I've learned not to beat myself about it, right? It's about playing to your strengths, becoming acutely aware. The first thing is, as we go through, what we do at work, it is equally important to bring our most authentic self to work. As women leaders, we often do ourselves and frankly the teams we work with a disservice when we try to do it all with a sense of invincibility. Is important for people to see and appreciate, because it helps the people around us understand what makes us tick, but also see a little bit of themselves in us, both the vulnerabilities and the strengths. Bringing your whole self to work, letting people see the multiple roles that you play is equally important, and if not more, than what you achieve at work, because it allows people to see what's possible as you balance the different priorities in your life. And that's really important. I think the third thing I will say, and again, this is a gender specific comment, is I often speak to, young leaders, also very senior people. And one of the things across industry that I hear from women managers is that they don't have enough role models, right? I don't see people making the same life choices that I want to make and grow my career at the same pace. I see people making very different choices. And because I don't see it, I don't believe I can. And I have thought long and hard about this. And what I have found has worked for me, and I'd like to offer this as some advice, is I have changed my mindset to look for goal models, not role models. You can learn from anyone, anywhere, in any context. They don't necessarily have to mirror your life choices. If you're open to embrace what they have been able to do to make a success of for themselves, and then adapt it to what's important to you, I find that it has been very helpful and allowed me to go further, because otherwise I really would not have made any of the choices I did in the past if I kept looking for someone who's done exactly that with the kind of life I lead, right? So I think that's just a very pragmatic thing to think about. And I think the very last thing I will say is, I do believe when she rises, we all rise. And I think it's not about whether you are an analyst and starting out, or whether you're a manager, or whether you're, the CEO of a company. And this is both for men and women. I think lifting those around us is just something we do from the very first day. And as you try to lift those around you, it comes back to you manyfold. And it's a far more fulfilling way to build a career. And I've been fortunate that I've had people who've lifted me, and I hope in my small way, as I've navigated my career choices, that I've had the privilege to work with people who feel I've done the same.